The Police Deputy Commissioner for National Operations is Mike Clement. I asked him why it took an Official Information Act request for the footage to be released to the families of the dead men.
I should go back a step, actually, and say that right from the outset, the police have been well aware of the need to be prioritising the support for and meeting the expectations of family. And on reflection, I've looked back over that process because I wasn't involved directly with Pike River, and I think they've done a stunning job. I mean, if we haven't met expectation of some, then that's disappointing, because I can tell you from my review and reflections on what happened back then was that they worked extremely hard. And that includes, for instance, making sure that the families were aware on a day-by-day basis what was happening at the mine and what information they might be able to glean as a consequence of what was happening at the mine. And that included letting them know in advance where that was possible, what probes were going to be put into the mine and what videos and what robots were going to be deployed. So the family knew what was happening in advance, knew to expect that there would be these images and debriefs available. And in fact, throughout the process, we're seeing excerpts from that video right through the process up until including the time of the commission.
Look, this is such a strikingly different version of events, and I'm just bewildered by it. And so I want to put it on the table. We have spoken to family member after family member. We've spoken to lawyers. We've spoken to everyone we can talk to this week, and no one has seen that striking footage of the man walking along the drift, except for Daniel Rockhouse. He is the only person who's told us he has previously seen it. None of the rest. And I've lost count of how many people we've spoken to. So how can your version of events be so different from their version of events?
Well, with regard to that specific imagery, we're talking about imagery taken from a robot that was deployed on the 15th of March 2011. That's after the police handed over the ownership of the mine to the receivers. So that happened on the 9th. So the police were handed that video subsequent to the deployment of that robot. So we had possession of it. The family knew in advance it was going to be deployed, and were told after it was deployed that it had been deployed. And as a part of the process leading in commission of inquiry, and actually from the outset of the investigation in response to the explosion, they had seen excerpts from various images.
But they haven't seen an excerpt with a man walking up the drift. Now, he is wearing bog standard industry overalls. His hands are bare. He has on breathing apparatus, yes, but there seems to be no other concessions whatsoever to the dangers of the drift. Now remember, there are 29 men somewhere further up beyond there, and the families have been repeatedly told the drift cannot be accessed because lives would be at risk.
Okay, well, when we showed the family 8 hours of video on the 23rd and 24th of July 2011, there was 8 hours of video from various sources, not just the video taken on the 15th of March. And they saw minutes, not hours, because there's 13 hours of it, and they've already seen 8 hours. And in the images that they did see from the 15th of March, there was the robot. It was in what was referred to as the airlock, and it did feature mines rescue staff wearing protective equipment similar to what you've just described.
Yeah, looking in a container, looking like they're standing in a container of some description, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Some of those images were released.
Absolutely, but they weren't out in the drift. They weren't out in the drift. Now, look, you have worked your way up through the ranks, and you know from cross-examining people, sometimes it's the stuff you don't say that is as material as the stuff you do say. I just don't understand why you didn't show the families a man in the drift.
Well, from the point of view of the police, we, as I say, had been very transparent and very engaged with and meeting the expectations of the family. At the time when those images were available, bearing in mind that was after a period after we'd handed over the ownership of the mine, the team that was stepping the families through the process of preparing them for the commission of inquiry and making sure that they were across as much of the detail as reasonable to be across, that was the images that were shown. So I can't put myself back in that.
But this, look, and absolutely, and you weren't even there at the time. You weren't even involved in it at the time.
But I'm not trying to.
I know, and you're fronting, and we appreciate it. But I can't stress strongly enough, and you must understand this, that it is material a man has been in the drift, because we are constantly told by Solid Energy and by the government that going into the drift is tantamount to some kind of death sentence. And this man has been in the drift, and he is alive.
That's right. So I think it's important, and this is where it's difficult for me because I can't speak for those that were in control of the mine at the time. But I understand, and you will understand too, probably having heard the same or seen the same release with regards to the conditions that existed in the mine when they deployed that robot. So I run the risk of misleading your listeners because I'm not an expert in mines, and the police weren't in charge of the mine on the 15th of March 2011. But I understand the circumstances were such that the environment, the gases inside the mine at that time had been neutralised by virtue of the introduction of nitrogen and the sealing of the mine. So
and that's a statement of fact. You're quite right. That's a statement of fact. But the whole case for a progressive re-entry. So the people we've spoken to, and look, I can't have a mining conversation with you because you are a policeman and I'm a journalist and neither of us really know anything about it. But the people we have spoken to say, here's what you do. You seal, you introduce nitrogen, you make the atmosphere safe, then you advance and do the same again, establishing beachhead after beachhead until you go as far as you can go. Now, the fact that this has happened, the fact that a man in pretty rudimentary clothing, bare hands, was able to do this and get out safely is material, isn't it? I just wonder, of all the shots the family should have seen, this seems to be at the top of the list.
Well, I accept that is the view of some. In July of 2011, when we had possession of that video, we played it, in a way that we considered to be open and transparent with the families, with no intent whatsoever to try and mislead them or deceive them.
Did Solid Energy, did someone from Pike River, in fact back then it was still Pike River, did Pike River, did the receiver, or did Solid Energy ask you, the police, at any stage, as far as you're aware, not to release these particular shots because it would compromise their case against re-entry?
No idea whatsoever that happened. I mean, if it happened, what I should say is, if it happened, I have no information.
Okay, and I accept that.
In fact, the opposite I would say is that everybody thought, and as I say, when I look back over the response of the staff that were involved in the day from a police perspective and across the organisation, my view of it is that everybody was trying to do exactly the opposite, was to be open and transparent. I accept that there are views held now that feel as though that wasn't the case. But I've spoken to the staff, many of them are in far-flung corners of the world now from a police perspective, and they're as upset as everybody that they're now being accused of deceiving the family members when their absolute intent, if nobody understands it, if anyone understands it better than the police, I'd be surprised how important it is to keep these people appraised.
Mike Clement, Police National Operations Deputy Commissioner.